We're going to think about adoration this morning, and if we could just dim the lights, because I'd like you to see this painting that you may not have seen before. I've asked the lights to be dim because it's a Rembrandt, as you can probably see from the note at the bottom. And you might have thought that you have seen it before because you've probably seen copies of it. Imagine you were the owner of a Roman villa. We can put the lights up now. Imagine you were owners of a Roman villa, in Rome, actually, a house in Rome today, and you had a painting on the wall that was called the Adoration of the Magi, but you thought that it was actually a copy of the Rembrandt that is now lost to history. One morning you come down to find that the painting has dropped off the wall and has damaged the frame. So you send it off to the repairers to be renewed, and while renewing the frame and repairing the frame, they think, please renew the picture as well and clean it up. The person who was charged with cleaning it up began to strip away all the sort of layers of grease and of dirt, and became more and more fascinated by the way in which it had been put together by the original artist, and became convinced that it was not by a copyist's hand, but it could be by the hand of the original artist, Rembrandt. And so the experts were called in, and lo and behold, a painting that cost a few £100 became worth a few million. Now, wouldn't it have been nice to have been the owner of that villa? And that would have been a nice one. And so we're going to think today about the adoration of the Magi. Let me read the account to you. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? Because we have come so that we may worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's priests, chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be a shepherd, the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. A number of years ago, there was a general election, which I think most of us here will remember. And the mantra of one of the candidates was consistently that the theme of the election was education, education, education. It was Tony Blair, Sir Tony Blair. That's good. Yeah, education is very important. This morning I want to suggest that actually there is something even more important than education. And it is ignition, not just education. Ignition in this sense, that you need and I need to be ignited to become fully the person that God intended me to be. Something in me has to be awoken, has to come to life and fruition if I am to actually enter into the fullness or discover something of the fullness that is within me. Something has got to grab me from within, something that is precious and dear to the individuality of who God has made me to be, and has to be ignited so that it can become that living principle that actually brings out that freeing of my character to become fully the person that I intend to be. And I think Matthew is onto it. He's onto it in this passage. And right at the very beginning of the life of Jesus, apart from Joseph being mentioned as naming him Jesus, the first physical action done to Jesus is of the Magi kneeling, sorry I'm going out of camera, kneeling, bowing down and worshipping Jesus. That was a moment of what I mean by ignition. That was significant. It was significant because on the day of Jesus' resurrection, the women are coming to embalm the body of Jesus, worried about the stone in front of the grave. So they should be. It was a hefty old beast. And they're confronted with the angel. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? He is risen. And so they make their way to tell the disciples the message of the angels, and they are met by Jesus. And what is the first action done to Jesus that Matthew records? They fall at his feet, and clasp his feet and worship him. That technique in ancient literature was one that was used very frequently by the ancient writers. It's now termed by the scholars as an inclusio, because it's like an envelope. It envelops the gospel, trying to say to us, this is significant. Everything flows from that act of adoration. Everything flows and is propelled towards that act of adoration. Adoration is what my gospel is about. Adoration of the Christ child. Adoration of the risen and ascended Jesus. And so, the Gospel of Matthew is the gospel which is about adoration and why we should adore the one that we name Jesus, the Christ, the Son of the living God. But he puts it in a setting, doesn't he? It's not just, as it were, the Magi following a star and bowing down and worshipping him. It's set within the context of all this stuff about Herod. And the word Herod would have resonated with every person who was in that era. Herod had made a name for himself. And just as the names of, say, Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, Idi Amin, Saddam Hussein, etc., etc., resonate with us, so the name of Herod would have resonated with them. Herod was the progenitor of violence within that part of the world. And my word, he got really violent. He was also a great builder. He built the temple, or he rather remodeled the second temple, as it was called. It was still part of the second temple era, Solomon's temple, and then the second temple that was raised after the restoration. And Herod remodeled it to become the great thing that it was, one of the great buildings of the world. But he was a builder of other places as well, palaces. Masada, you can go there, some of you probably have been. Herodian, another of his fortresses. And he went on building buildings ad nauseum through his life, off the backs of the poor peasantry of Judea. So the whole of Judea was, by the end of his life, in total ferment of wanting to revolt against this revolting regime. And that was the turbulence. And in the midst of it, Matthew gives us this picture of adoration within a turbulent world that was known to be turbulent. Herod had such a reputation that actually even his friend Augustus, who had previously been named Octavian, but after the Civil War he became the triumphant Caesar Augustus. Even Caesar Augustus, who was his friend, said about Herod, it was better to be a pig, a hus, in the family of Herod than to be a huios, a son, in the family of Herod. Why? Because he had two of his sons exterminated because he felt they were a threat. So what the Bible is talking about a paranoid old man fearing his throne, is precisely the character that he was. And in the midst of this horrendous picture, this act of simple prostration, clasping of feet, actually we're hearing from the end of the gospel, and an act of worship. Adoration. So what is adoration? Just three things I want to suggest to you that is involved in the act of adoration. First, adoration is a liberation from ourselves. When you adore something, you are taken out of yourself into a moment of pure attention where you forget yourself and you're caught up in what is drawing your attention and in some way is stirring your heart for good, and you're saying, wow. C.S. Lewis, in his book about the Psalms, in his chapter on praise, talks about this movement, this being set free from ourselves, which he actually says is actually the original sin, and we need to be liberated from that selfward attention and absorption so that we become caught up in something bigger, greater, more wonderful and majestic. Adoration is the cure for the self-centeredness that is at the root of all sin and the cause of all actual sins that we commit. So it is a sense of being liberated, being set free. And he had a wonderful phrase about adoration and worship. He called it inner health made audible. Isn't that beautiful? Inner health made audible. Wonderful. Wonderful. And that's what adoration is. It is that moment when you are set free from yourself and you just get magnetized by something that seems to be greater than you, and you're drawn to it. Ultimately, we believe it's not just something that we're being drawn to, but it is the being that is behind everything that is wonderful. What is that being like? If all this is wonderful, what is that being like who has made all this? If I can be caught up in adoration with this event or that scene or that, how much more wonderful is the God, the being that lies behind all of that? Inner health made audible. And so now I want us to notice what adoration is. And it's to do with contemplation. It's not just liberation, it's a contemplation. What I mean by that is that what we do here on a Sunday, when we have what we call our times of worship, and that we may associate with singing worship, which is part of what worship is. And we've been reminded of it this morning in a very special and beautiful way. But what I want you to notice is that adoration is one of the most frequent ways in which human beings respond to their environment. I like to say that the language that we hear, beyond just the passing on of information and the just normal discourse, our language is full of two kinds of language. One is the language of moaning and groaning, and the other is the language of wow. I think we're all familiar with the language of moaning and groaning, certainly after the miserable days that we seem to have had over the last, goodness how many weeks? Oh no, not another miserable day. And I guess we're very familiar with the moaners and the groaners in the places where we have to work or where we live our lives, or maybe someone that we live with. You think, oh no, he's off again, or she's off again, moaning and groaning away. So how many of us would prefer to be in the company of someone who uses the language of moaning in comparison to someone who is using the language of wow, wow. You know the kind of person that you go and you engage with, and you come away and you say, oh, I feel so good. That person has done me good. They've really done me good. Contagious. Contagious. Wow. Exactly.
Contagious in a good way, not like COVID.
Yeah, not like COVID. So right, Jan. Contagious. That's exactly it. The contagion of adoration. I had a moment just a couple of weeks ago. I've had many moments since then, but a couple of weeks ago we were just going out to, I was just going into town to get, no, it must have been 3 weeks ago now, because I went on my own 2 weeks ago. But 3 weeks ago we went together. We were just getting ourselves ready to go out to Southwell Market on a Saturday morning. And I went to check the French windows at the back of the house. And as I just moved towards the door, on the fence, just a few feet away from me, about where that window is, okay? So we're talking about, what's that? I don't know. Just a few feet. There was a female sparrowhawk sitting, and its eye was on me. And my eye was on it. And I'd like to use a sort of poetic image. I was taloned by the sparrowhawk. I was captured. It was a wow moment because the wild was invading the domestic. Such a domestic, ordinary scene. And the wild came in and captured me. And as I reflected on it, I thought, that's a picture of God in my life. That's a picture of God in my life. The wildness of the compassionate God breaking in to the littleness of my life and world. Wow. It just got me. Got me here. And I praise God. But I only did that on reflection. At the moment, I was just caught up in the wow. In other words, those wow moments that you and I have, that all of us have, I believe, or we've had the chance of having them in our lives, it's whether they become events in and of themselves or whether they become windows through which I look to that which is beyond and the wonder of it, that which lies beyond. George Herbert, one of our finest poets, had a wonderful phrase that is actually there in one of our hymns, although we don't sing it these days. A man that looks on glass, on it may stay his eye, or, if he pleaseth, through it pass, and then the heaven espy. Remember that one? Glass was a new thing in that period. It had started to fill the big stately homes around the country, and it was beginning to enter into the rich sort of moneyed classes of British society. And George Herbert took that image of glass, this amazing material that meant you could actually see out during winter, for goodness sake. You didn't have to shutter it off. You could actually look out, and then the heaven espy, and he says, that's it. So often what happens to us as human beings is that we stay on the surface. We become caught up in the physics of glass. But that's not the point of glass. Glass's physics, its wonder, is that it helps you to actually pass over into that which is greater and more wonderful still, the view beyond. I don't know how many of you listen to your news by way of Radio 4's Today programme, but I regularly listen to the Today programme. And I love this period between Christmas and I think it will go on till tomorrow, where they have a guest editor. In other words, they have someone who's quite well known and who's had some sort of notoriety in their life or something, and they are invited to actually bring their interests to help shape part of the program. And you have this theme running through it. So rather than miserable, 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 next miserable, next miserable, let's end with something really miserable. You have some other inspiring stories. Oh, sorry, I caricature it. I'm being naughty now as a preacher because it's not all miserable, but mostly it is, let's be honest. So you get some really good things. And they had Jane Goodall on. Now you all know Jane Goodall. She's the lady who at the age of 26 discovered that chimpanzees make tools. And it changed our definition of human beings. Because up until then, the clever people had thought that man is the tool maker. Suddenly, those clever people weren't so clever. We're more than just tool makers. And so we've had to find other things. It's been happening to scientific theories all the time. What was true then is actually not quite so true today. It's true, but it's not quite so true. It's only partial truth. All of science is only partial truth. And she relayed and was interviewed about a powerful moment in her life. She was making a visit to the Notre Dame Cathedral, burnt down now, or part of it burnt down, being renovated. And when she was in there was a wedding going on deep somewhere in the, not the bowels, but in the sort of some part of that vast, wonderful bit of architecture. And the sun was shining through the stained glass window. It was beautiful. And then, as part of the wedding ceremony, the organist struck up Bach's Toccata and Fugue in B minor. Do you know the one? Did you recognize it? And she said, it was a moment when I realized there had to be someone, some being behind everything. It was too beautiful. It was too full of meaning to not be caught up. It was a wow moment. And she looked through the glass to the beyond. So it's not just liberation. It's not just formation. But thirdly, it's formation. Contemplation and formation. Because when we get to that point, and I don't care what it is, very often it isn't here on church as we are singing our songs. It isn't, let's be honest. Sometimes it might be. I was touched a bit this morning by your singing, Jan, as you led us right at the beginning. You noted it. Touch me. More about that in a moment as to why that touched me. But what I'm aware of, that when we actually do look through the glass to what is beyond, in other words, to the God, the wonder, the being that lies beyond everything, and we come to that moment in genuine wonder, lost in wonder, love and praise, as the hymn has it. When we do that, what do we meet? What do we find when we are actually in God's presence? What is the God that we're in touch with? And this is where it's a wonderful, wonderful moment. We find that the God that is receiving our gaze is the God who is gazing on us with wonder, love, and praise. We're not worth it, surely we're not worth it. Thus you shall put my name on the Israelites, or thus shall Aaron and his sons put my name on the Israelites. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and to be gracious to you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Isn't that beautiful? When you are caught up in wonder, love and praise by a moment in your life, and it could be a mini moment of wow. I love these mini moments of wow when you just open the curtain and you see, oh, what a beautiful day. What a beautiful moment that was as I saw that child just skipping down the street. What a wonderful moment that was as I saw mother and child gazing into one another's eyes with wonder and love. A beautiful moment. Because here we have it. You and I receive everything that we are from that which is other than us. You and I receive our very identity. If you've had good enough parents, your identity, your sense of who you are will have been drawn from you by the loving gaze of your mother, your father, or whoever it is who has brought you up. It is that very gaze, that love, despite your burping, despite you filling your nappy, it was your despite pooping or whatever it was, that gaze went on and on. Oh, you little rascal, you've gone and done it again, but I love you and you're gorgeous. That's what gave you your sense of who you are. You just look at the damage that is captured in someone's body if they haven't had a good enough parent. It wreaks havoc, absolute havoc in someone's life. But because we are learning to adore God through Christ, and we're learning to actually view the whole of his creation, which resounds to the glory of God. We were singing that earlier. We are learning to see with the eyes of adoration because our eyes have been opened that that is the appropriate thing. And it's the appropriate thing because we've learnt it by bowing our knee and worshipping the Christ, the Anointed One. And it opens our eyes to see that really the whole of life is a wow. If we can be but sensitized to it. And even in those moments when we all go through, and that many of you have gone through, where you have had those dearest to you, those things that have been dearest to you stripped away from you, as they will be from all of us at some point. Because we have learnt to look through the glass, to see the heaven beyond, we will even be able to go through that, not without grief. We will grieve, and will grieve deeply. The more deeply you love, the more deeply you will grieve, but you will go through it healthily, because you've learned to look beyond. And your life will have been formed, fashioned, to be someone who has the name of God, Yahweh, of Christ, printed on your being. Thus you shall put my name on, not Israel, but the Israelites. So, church, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you and keep you in his peace.